this gentleman, and his name is Al. Now, Al, sadness is no stranger to Al. At one point in his life, he was so consumed with mental depression that he was totally incapacitated. He once expressed the words, "I am now the most miserable man living." If what I feel were equally distributed throughout the whole human family in this earth, there won't be one cheerful soul living. So that was how he was. He was severely depressed, living in misery. Well, he has every reason to feel miserable in his outlook of life. He was born into a poor family. He failed in business. Then he got rejected for a job that he put his whole heart into it. His true love died prematurely in an untimely death, and he proposed to another lady who spurned his offer. Al's life, history, and tendency to melancholy appear to ensure that he will never arise above his circumstances and to make anything out of his life. Well, half a world away, there was another person, and decades later, by the name of W.C. Another similar story played out. Born, but he was a bit different. He was born in a prominent family. Nevertheless, he had challenges physically, mentally, and emotionally from a very young age. When he was 3, he was thrown off the donkey and suffered a brain concussion. At 11 years old, he saw his life hanging as a physician trying to save him from pneumonia. As luck would be, at 18 years old, he fell nearly 30 feet and ruptured his kidney. Twice he failed to pass an entrance exam for his chosen college. And his father told him that he was leading an idle, useless, and unprofitable life, that he would become a mere social wastrel, one of hundreds of public school failures. How would you feel when you go through all that and your family will tell you that you are a failure? So, destined to fail? These challenges provide a glimpse into the roots of depression and life's challenges and situations that will plague throughout someone's life. The picture of this man, W.C., that emerges is a life story that seems destined to end in obscurity. Al, his name is Abraham Lincoln. He could have succumbed to his depression and not amounted to much. Instead, he forged ahead and became one of the most revered American presidents ever. What about W.C.? His depression could have been a concluding chapter of another grim story. But W.C. is Sir Winston Churchill. He rose above the circumstances and stirred the soul of Britain in one of the darkest hours. The life history of Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill offers hope to every single one of us who experience unfairness in our lives, and including mental health and people who face depression. But they both engage in bitter conflict of the battle of opinion. However, the most important confrontation occurs on the level of our mind. The battle for the mind is real. We have battles every day in our minds. And how do we gain mental resilience? How do we picture together, how do we piece together in the life of Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill to fight through the circumstances of your life and to break free from depression? You know, Winston Churchill used to call his depression a little black dog. This black dog used to follow him wherever he goes. The dog will press him down and be doing all sorts of things to him in his life. When he goes and sees down the mirror, the black dog is there. When he's sleeping at night, the black dog is sleeping beside him. When he's about to have his meal and the black dog is there, he loses his appetite. The black dog continues to hound him. But friends, one thing that I've learned in my field and helping with a lot of my patients,
black dog need not be a giant dog. But in fact, this black dog is actually a puppy. You just have to teach him or her how to walk. Instead of the dog bringing you for the walk, but you bring the dog for a walk. And there are things that we can do to help us in mental health. I'm going to share with you some of the things that we can use and utilize, and how we can help others as well through this fantastic and powerful health message that we possess, that God has given all of us. I'd like to share with you one thing. An entire sea can't sink a ship unless you allow the water to get into the ship. Similarly, the negative of the world can't put you down unless you allow it to get into your mind. Does it make sense? It's very important. Sometimes we are like a ship in stormy sea. The waves are high and tall, and the rain was beating upon our face. We can't even see 5 feet ahead of us, throwing up and down and almost seemingly drowning. But the sea and the ocean can't touch us as long as we do not allow the water to come into the ship. Do not allow negativity to come into our mind. That's why we need to guard our heart and our mind. The Bible tells us that we need not fear. There are 365 variations of do not be afraid, do not fear, do not be of good courage. And it is one promise for each day for the year. And sometimes some of us right here may be facing the toughest battle of our life. God knows that. Sometimes you ask, why did God keep allowing these battles to come to my life? One after another. But there's a good way of looking at that, which is this. God gave his hardest battles to his toughest soldiers. Amen?
Amen.
So if God allows something to happen, he knows that he can deliver you through. We just have to cling onto him and promises. We just got to cling long enough and hard enough. God will show through. And that is a very important concept we always have to bear in mind. It's very, very important to remind ourselves of this. And one of the things that we know that the Bible says in Hebrews chapter 13 verse 5, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Titus chapter 1 verse 2, which we have learned in Sabbath school today, God cannot lie. Hebrews chapter 6 verse 17, it is impossible for God to lie. If God can't lie, and it's impossible for God to lie, when Jesus says, I will never leave you nor forsake you, that holds true. Always need to remember that. God will never lie, and he always keeps his promises. You may not feel that God is with you. You may not have a sense that God is with you. We need to believe by faith, because God cannot lie. He is with us. And when you are down, find someone to pray with. When you find someone to pray with, when 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I will be in the midst of them. And that is the promise of God. And there is a battle going on in our mind on a daily basis. A battle between good and evil, morality and immorality, helpful thoughts and unhelpful thoughts. These thoughts either lead to good and sound decisions, or they will lead to poor and regretful decisions. The ability to make sound decisions is dependent on the functionality of our frontal lobe. Today we did talk about some of the things that frontal lobe some of the factors can affect our frontal lobe. Things like when we overindulge in social media and electronic devices that does not bring us up, does not edify us, we need to be very careful. And today I'll be talking about other things that can affect our frontal lobe as well. Our frontal lobe is indeed under siege. We're living in a time where the frontal lobe is affected by environmental toxins and influences such as digital addiction and overuse and other sort of substances. Briefly talk about that, about moderate use, screen use. We're living in a society that we cannot eliminate electronic use completely through our whole lives. The key thing is balance. We need to set about boundaries. God gave us boundaries for a reason. The 10 Commandments are the pillars of boundaries. We need to have that boundary in sight that we will not go outside. God says, you need to worship one God and one God only. For I am a jealous God. You shall not make any carved images and everything. Because, we need to follow it. So when God says that I'm the only God to worship, because by nature, we have this addiction to worship. We are made to worship. If we do not focus on worshiping God, we'll be worshiping someone else or something else. So God is setting boundaries for us. God tells us, essentially do not commit adultery. And Jesus went a bit further. If you look at the woman in a way that you're not supposed to look, you have already committed adultery. And where does it stem from? The mind. And God also tells us we commit murder from our heart. In what way? In John tells us that if we speak evil of someone else, we have committed murder for no reason. We commit murder in our heart, which is in the mind. So everything starts from the mind. It goes a bit further from that. So it's important that we need to set boundaries. One of the key things, and in a study in 2018, a British study tied social media to decrease disrupted and delayed sleep, which is associated with depression, memory loss, and poor academic performance. Recently there was a study as well. They studied a group of people where they have their handphones close to them. They're not using them. You're just here and then you're just doing their studies. And they assess them. As opposed to another group of people who have handphones stay in the next room. And they measure their cognitive ability. And those who have the devices closer to them, their performance actually dropped compared to those ones whose phones even further away. So somehow, that can have a source of distraction as well. And you don't have to actually use it to do that. Because I think it's because we really have that proximity and that distraction that we are willing to want to use the phone that can affect us in our cognitive ability. As I mentioned before, the social media can affect the user's physical health even more directly. Researchers know the connection between the mind and the gut can also turn anxiety and depression into nausea, headache, muscle tension, and tremors. Why is social media dangerous for adolescents and children? One of the reasons is this, because their frontal lobe is not fully developed. That's why we need parents to help reason with them. In Bible in Corinthians, the Bible tells us that we ought not to compare ourselves with each other. We're not compared to each other, right? And it is foolish to do so. And the thing about social media is that when adolescents start to look at those things, they crave what they have they do not have. And they idolize those things that they don't have. They want to be like them. And when you start comparing and you just realize you do not meet the standards, and over a period of time that consumes you. And not only adolescents, even adults as well. And that's why God says, do not covet your neighbor's donkey and properties and all these things in the 10th commandment. Because by coveting, we have this desire will never be fulfilled. God is trying to protect us and to guide us. One of the key things that I've always helped from patients in terms of when they are struggling with mental health is to come back to their values. Values are important. What are your values? I usually give them a homework. You go find out what your values are. I'll draw 8 circles. I get them to fill them out. What values? Is the values of love, compassion, and integrity, honesty. You have to have those values. And it's good for us to know what our values are. Why? Because when something happens in your life, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's at school, whether it's at church, whether that is outside, when someone challenges your character, and if you stick by your values, you know what your values are, you know the values of the Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and you know what the values are, it will match against those values. Those are your protection. Sometimes your mind will tell you something else about yourself, and you need to question, is that me? Is that truly me? And you need to bounce back, use that values as your pillar, as your fence. And those are really important to invest on those values. Sometimes you may have a certain value that you are trying to achieve. Put that down. It reminds you where you want to go in terms of those values. Those Christian values are very important. Things that affect the frontal lobe and things are like toxins. Toxins can affect our frontal lobe. So things like smoking, alcohol, drug use, and the next one is UPS. Anyone know what UPS is? Plastics? Not really. Yeah, but plastics can affect our frontal lobe as well, the toxins and stuff. I'll talk more since you brought that up. I'll talk about that. UPS are essentially ultra-processed foods. Anyone heard of that before? Ultra-processed foods? And you know what the difference between processed food and ultra-processed food? We'll talk about that. Okay, that's a big one coming up. But I'm going to show you about this SPECT scan that I've briefly talked about before. The SPECT scan is a scan that basically is a nuclear medicine that evaluates the blood flow and activity to the brain. So you can see on your left-hand side, this is the very, very universal, looking healthy brain. The blood flow is fairly even throughout the whole brain. But when you have someone with a toxic brain scan, people who take drugs like heroin, cannabis, alcohol, smoking, and you find that there are certain areas in your brain that have been shut down where the blood flow is not going there, and they appear to have holes in their brain. So we now know through this SPECT scan there are certain things that can affect the blood flow to the brain itself. And for example, this is again on the left-hand side the healthy brain, and the SPECT scan on the right-hand side, the marijuana user brain. Can you look at that? The brain almost like shrinks, and there's a lot of holes in the brain where the areas that are not going. We're standing on a very, very, very thin ice here. Canada has legalized cannabis, and we're seeing younger children coming out with psychosis, meaning that they have a severe kind of mental health. And some of these things are not reversible, and it just stays with you for the rest of your life. You get hallucinations, you're very, very poor insight, you're very disruptive, and it's a very, very tough thing to deal with. This is not something that we want to go towards. And we are living in a country that's a culture of alcohol. And people are drinking alcohol, and people are starting to realize, we know that when Alan White talked about, alcohol is detrimental to our health, there has to be zero alcohol. We shouldn't be taking alcohol at all. And what we see here is heavy alcohol abuse, and you see the SPECT scan. Again, the same thing, always the same scenario with the hole in the brain. And research has shown yeah, absolutely. If there's any questions along the way, you want to raise your hand. We're going to make it interactive, and just basically put up your hand, and we'll be happy to answer them. Okay? So any questions that come along the way. So this is basically another research as well on alcohol. It shrinks the brain volume. They studied ages in a group of people, and they basically lost the brain volume. Has anyone ever asked you, didn't Jesus turn, the water into wine? And we should be, a lot of Sunday Christians, they always ask me this question, and I'm sure you face with that. Does anyone, how do you deal with that? How do you answer that? Does anyone have any idea how you answer them? Do you stumble upon them? Who struggle with that? Yeah? And who has an answer to that? Anyone?
It was not fermented wine.
Sorry?
It was not fermented.
It was grape juice.
Unfermented wine.
Yeah.
How do you get that from the Bible? How do you know it's unfermented wine
Grape
from
juice.
the Bible?
It's not in the Bible.
Because it was done instantly, whereas fermented wine.
That's a good one. That's a good one. There's a few things in the Bible. The word wine, if you come back from the English word wine, when you trace all the way back into the 16th century, the definitions of the wine actually changes throughout centuries. And the wine in the past can represent, in the 16th century and before, wine can represent fermented or unfermented. They kind of use it interchangeably. And in the Greek word as well, they use yayin and tirosh, and there's a lot of confusion surrounding that. But if you look at your Bible, I think you turn to your Bible in John chapter 2. In John chapter 2, when Jesus essentially was in the first ministry. And the question is, how do we know that this is essentially an unfermented wine, which is a pure grape juice? And I'm going to point to you in this. It's very interesting. You know, I'll just read out in John chapter 2, just follow me. And the third day there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. So Jesus and the disciples were there, and we know that they were probably there because of the relation of the mother of Jesus was there, so there is some sort of a relative relation to that, or close friend. And when they wanted the wine, the mother of Jesus said unto him, They have no wine. Jesus, verse 4, saith unto her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? Mine hour is not yet come. Now Jesus is saying in a very polite way, woman, at that time, is not being rude to the mother, but it was the culture saying, you know, when they address someone whom they respect, they call a woman, what have I to do with it? For the hour of not yet come. What hour is Jesus talking about? It's the hour when you will glorify God. So there was a lot of episodes when it's not come, but when it came to when you got crucified, it says that finally the hour has come. So it's saying that it's not the hour has not yet come to manifest the glory of God. But his mother said unto the servant, the mother, you know what? Yeah, what Jesus is saying. His mother said to the servant, whatsoever he says unto you, do it. Now the key verse is this. How do we know this is the unfermented wine? In verse number 5, verse number 6, and there was set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of what? What's the water pot used for? For the purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Now, purification of the Jews, they have a tradition. To come into the house, they had to wash themselves. They wash their hands, they wash their feet. And the symbolism of cleansing. To go into the house cleansed. Right? And to purify the water, this water must be so this water, should it be clean or should it be dirty? Clean. It should be pure. Should be clean. As clean as possible. You can't have dirty water. It's against the traditions of the Jews. It has to be clean. And Jesus said to them, fill the water pot with water, and they filled it out to the brim. And he said to them, draw out and take it to the master. And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants were drawn to water and knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. When the guests are well drunk, then the inferior, you have kept the good wine until now. Verse 11. This beginning of signs Jesus did in the Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now the key word here is the purification of the Jews. The water pot. If that water is pure water, as clean as possible for that time, how can Jesus change the water into a fermented wine which is unclean? Does that make sense? When Jesus was breaking the bread at the Last Supper, is it 11 or unleavened?
11.
Unleavened, because 11 represents sin. And it says that this unleavened bread represents my body. How can that wine, if it's fermented, which is also a symbolism of sin, represent the body? You see what I'm trying to say? So here, for the purification of the water, that Jesus was symbolizing that my hour has not yet come, but it will come when my blood, where this wine that will represent my blood, this unfermented wine that represents my blood, will cleanse the world of their sin. So therefore, this wine cannot be the fermented wine. Any questions at all? Shall we move on? Okay, any points? Just raise your hand. So, I know we all don't drink, but this is some evidence that you can have conversations with your friends, with your colleagues, those who does, and ask you, why don't you drink? You can tell them about the brain scans that shows that, you know what, it reduced the oral blood flow to the brain, it reduced my frontal lobe, and it reduced my ability to make sound decisions. So, really, really important. And in the past, have you heard, doctors were saying you drink 1 glass of wine, every day, that will help your heart? That people tell you that, right? I drink wine to help your heart. But you know what? Now they realize that they were wrong. In the 1960s, they said smoking is good for asthma. And now they were wrong. And now they're wrong again. It is not the wine that helps with the heart. It's the color of the wine, the ingredient of that purple tinge that actually helps the heart. That purple tinge, that color that gives the red wine color, comes from the grape skin. And that antioxidant is called resveratrol. The resveratrol is a very powerful antioxidant that will help reduce inflammation in our body, in our veins, and in our arteries. And that's the reason why. But the alcohol actually causes harm to the body. They've done research now. They come to a conclusion that World Health Organization that zero alcohol, or even 1 drop, is beneficial for us because it's toxic and it's classified as group 1 carcinogen, putting alongside asbestos, radiation, and tobacco. And it can essentially cause 6 kinds of cancer: oral cancer, throat cancer, larynx cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer. So all of these things. So now we know that we can't do that. So it's something like a conversation starter that you can speak to your friends and colleagues who actually they may be drinking, trying to help them out as well. And doing that actually saves lives. And the Bible tells us that we should not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of mind, that we may prove what is good and acceptable in the perfect will of God. So things can help activate our frontal lobe. Things that can help us in our health is moderate intensity exercise. Exercise actually triggers our mind and can help our frontal lobe to grow. Now, when people ask me, when I go exercise every day. I go for a walk and I walk for 20-30 minutes. That's excellent. But why is my blood pressure still high? Why is my weight not dropping? Why is my cholesterol still high? And why is my sugar still high? Now, activity is better than no activity. But what we also know that simple walking activity, gentle activity is not good enough. We have to push our heart rate to at least 120 to 140 beats per minute. That means you have to be struggling when you walk. Otherwise, when you gentle walk, it's like window shopping. You're just walking and walking and walking and walking, and you pat yourself on the back. But if you really want to have a benefit of exercise, your heart rate has to go up. When your heart rate goes up, your blood is flowing through, it's releasing a lot of endorphins, and these things can help basically reverse heart disease if you do it the right way and reduce inflammation in the artery. So you can actually break it up. What they recommend is 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. Moderate intensity exercise is meaning when you exercise, you can't have a full conversation with a friend or family. You can say a few words and that's it. But if you're talking and about different things and everything, you're not exercising high enough. You gotta go a bit faster. I say, I have 30 minutes in a day. But you know what? There's this thing that came out. I went to a convention that says snack exercise. Not snacking on food, but snack exercise. What's snack exercise? Snack exercise is doing exercise in between what you can. So there's a challenge. For example, one challenge is that I want to do 100 squats a day. Doing 100 squats at once is going to be tough. But if you break it up, let's say I'm waiting for the water to boil, I will do 5 squats. And then I'm waiting for the bus, I'll do 5 squats. I'm waiting for my husband or my wife, I'll do 10 squats. And you add them up, trying to aim for 100 at the end of the day. And someone actually did that and challenged themselves. And they blog it. At the end of the month, they not only lose weight, they sleep better. And they actually feel better. And they think better. So can we do some snack exercise? Challenge yourself. It could be a form of push-ups. 100 push-ups in a day, or 100 squats in a day. It may seem like a lot, but when you start doing it and you make the effort doing it, it's actually not a lot when you break it up all together. Okay? And those actually help a lot with those things. If you struggle with motivation, sometimes for some people, going to classes and things like that can help. And sometimes
having a similar goal as a family, together with your kids. Let's do it together. Let's have this goal. We are now in February 2025. How do we optimize our health and make it consistent throughout the whole year? And snack exercise is the perfect way of doing it. Those people who are time poor. When you do it in the family, you keep each other accountable. You keep each other accountable. And next one. All right. How do we feed our frontal lobe? How do we increase our frontal lobe?
We need to feed the brain with the right oil. Things like olive oil, extra virgin, cold pressed olive oil. Do you know the difference? You know, like a conventional just olive oil, and then you see this extra virgin, and then you see this cold pressed, and it's just like, I'm going to go for the cheapest one. Right? Go for the cheapest one. There's a difference. If you're talking about extra virgin, cold pressed olive oil, when the factories press the olive oil, the first press, and it is extra virgin. Because you can do a second press, you can do a third press, you can do a fourth press. You can squeeze them out. So the first press is extra virgin. There's also a cold press or heat press. Obviously with heat, you're able to squeeze out more, but a cold press you can squeeze out less. But without the heat, it doesn't change the structure of the oil. Okay? Sometimes changing the structure of the oil can in fact backfire and cause inflammation in our arteries. So, if that's possible, if you're able to afford it, go for extra virgin cold press. And those who doesn't mention cold press, usually they're heat press. Those who doesn't mention extra virgin, they usually repeatedly press and you get the remaining ones. So those that are not good, those are the best. Those are the good oils that we can use. Avoid vegetable oils, avoid seed oils, cotton seed oil, grapeseed oils. Avocado seed is okay, but some of the seed oils are not that great. Why? Because they are actually heat pressed and sometimes can cause inflammation. Now, I talk about ultra-processed food, right? The UPS. I want to talk about it right now. So what are ultra-processed foods? Now, foods that are processed essentially exist, they're not in the natural form. So whole foods, for example, we have fruits. In its nature, you cut the fruits, that's whole foods. When you have salad, those are whole foods, they're not processed. Processed foods are things like cereals, right? Cereals, they're processed, they're basically compressed and they're made into something else. And what the recommendation is avoiding, have more whole food, that's the whole foods as much as you can. And if you can't, you can have processed food. But now they're saying avoid ultra-processed food. Ultra-processed food is a derivative of food where they are highly processed. They add a lot of additives into it. And if you're not well aware of that, you may be, taken for a ride. I can walk through Coles and Woolies and different places, there are labels of food that basically says healthy, low sugar, low fat, zero fat, and things like that. But when you look at the labels, you start to see different things, right? You need to look at the fat content. You need to look at the sugar content. But now you need to look at other content. What other content? Ultra-processed food content. What are they? They are numbers that you don't understand. Okay? You will see numbers like 150 or A250 or A10 or things like that. Those are artificial or highly processed ingredients that are put to the food. Why do they do that? Because they are cheap processed. So how they do that is for profit. For example, in the past, I think 30 years ago, you probably would have ultra-processed food. But what they realized is that when people were making cotton, when they have cotton, they manufacture the cotton, and they end up tons and tons of cotton seeds, and they dispose them away. A businessman was trying to think, can we put good use on these cotton seeds? Let's press it into oil. They get these tons and they put the throw away. They start to heat press it, they put it into oil, and then they sell them. So instead of putting the expensive cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, let's replace it with cottonseed oil. And thereby, they're cheap products, and they basically reduce their margin and reduce their input of money and they increase their margin. And it comes down to us. And they start to realize that what we are seeing now is that a lot of food, ultra-processed food, is causing a lot of people a lot of problems. Heart disease, diabetes, headaches, migraine. And here's the big one. If you look into it, there was I think it was BBC, they actually got a twin. And they studied them for, I believe it was 10 days. One twin, they fed her with essentially minimal, just basically whole plant-based whole foods and stuff like that. And they feed them and they document all the things, how you feel, what's your energy level like, how to sleep, and things like that. And you track them through the concentration throughout this whole 10 days. And the other twin was essentially fed with ultra-processed food, as much as possible, give her ultra-processed food. And then they document them. Same amount of protein, same amount of calories, same amount of fat, same amount of sugar, same amount of activity, monitor them. After 10 days, they come back together. The one with the whole foods actually lost weight, even though it's the same calories and everything. The other one with ultra-processed food actually gained weight. And the ultra-processed food that lady was just wanted to stop, but because of that, she kept going. She started getting headaches, she's getting very tired, the concentration is not great, and there's a lot of inflammation going. At the end of the 10 days, I can't wait to get back into my normal diet again. I can't do this ultra-processed food. So now there's the beginning, there's books, everything around it, TED Talks are talking about that. It's causing a lot of inflammation out there. You can be plant-based, you can be vegan, but if you are indulged on ultra-processed food, that can cause inflammation in our body. Sometimes we see, vegan and yet you can't lose the weight. Something we have to think about. There's certain things, because we actually have the weight, there are certain things that we need to educate ourselves in what we're putting inside our body. And that can affect our brain as well. It can cause inflammation in our mind. And we need to try to minimize those kind of things, especially people with mental health as well. We just have to do that. But all of us try to avoid, we can't avoid totally, but we just have to minimize as much as we can. Okay? We just try to minimize as we can. And that's the ultra-processed food. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah,
about the ultra-processed food?
question.